Well, good afternoon. Good to be here one more time. We're out here today. We got our Bibles open to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews 11 is where it talks about faith and how that there was many a name in this chapter 11 of where faith was important. And I've been reading on these verses probably for the last several days, and I went back to it even today and I started looking at it, and I want to take the man named Moses. We don't hear too much about him. I mean, we hear him in Bible stories and things, and Hebrews does sort of mention him here. But what I want to do is look at verse 23 and go down and just remind us of who Moses was and the advantages of being on the right side. Moses was on the right side. I just got finished reading a little bit about the 3 Hebrew boys that was thrown in the fiery furnace. Well, them 3 boys was on the right side as well. That's an example of the benefit of being on the right side, because there was 4 that was in the fire, and the one that was in the fire was as the Son of God. So I'm speaking today in Hebrews 11, verse 23. It says this: by faith, Moses. Now you notice, by faith. Faith is important. The Bible says over, I believe in this very verse right here in Hebrews 11, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it, or by faith, the elders obtained a good report. So this man Moses is in this same chapter. It says, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents. I forgot that. I went and looked up Moses's father and mother, and I don't remember them off the top of my head, but the names didn't sound familiar. But I looked them up on who they was. I didn't write them down. You can go do research like I did, but he had a mother and a father, and he was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child. He was a proper child. I want to think that you could also consider he was a special child. And it could have very well been that God made Moses to be the word, quote, proper child. Was it Moses, or was it the creation of God that allowed Moses to be the proper child? And they, the parents, were not afraid of the king's commandment. Now we know, as we keep on going, we'll know, then we remember reading where the king was trying to get rid of some people, and some of the boy babies, I think, that the king was trying to, make sure there wasn't an overthrow. But see, that's not my message now. But see, they wasn't scared of the king's commandment. Then it goes on in verse 24, by faith, Moses, when he was come to years, meaning as he got older in his adulthood, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Now you got to understand, Pharaoh was a rich man. Pharaoh had a lot of power. Pharaoh lived in the lap of luxury. He was the king of the Egyptians, and he lived sumptuously. He was a man that didn't lack for anything. And see, Moses could have had it made in the physical sense, because it says here that he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter had the inheritance of Pharaoh. So because Moses was allowed to be the son of Pharaoh's daughter, Moses said nothing to it. Now, for a season, he was raised by Pharaoh's daughter, by his own mother, so to speak, to save his life. His life was saved because of the fact that Pharaoh's daughter wanted this child. Remember, they would put him in a basket and they hid him in the Nile River, in the thicket of the weeds. And the lady came down and was bathing and heard the baby cry. I think I'm right. But she saw the baby and wanted the baby for her own. And it just so happened that the mother was the one that was the, I don't know what you would call her. I don't want to use the word slave, but that very well could be a good word, that she was somewhat of a slave to Pharaoh's daughter, so that it was like, the mother of Moses was like, the babysitter, which helped raise Moses to be the man that he is now. And then it says, choosing rather to suffer the affliction of God's people than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Now see, the season of Pharaoh and the Egyptian and the king's house was only a few little measly little seconds compared to God's time. Just a very wee little bit of time. And see, he chose rather to suffer the affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin. And I think that's where a lot of people is today. They don't want to see the future blessing down the road. They don't want and they don't care about the future blessing, because the future blessing you can't see yet. And we're fixing to get to another verse that actually goes in a little bit more detail. He didn't enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. He was able with his eyes, his spiritual eyes, to look further beyond Egypt. He looked beyond Pharaoh. He looked beyond the wealth of the king's castle. He looked far beyond the wealth of the money and the power that he could have had by being Pharaoh's son or grandson, that he didn't want to even be part of that. But see, his eyes was looking ahead into the future, because it mentions here, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches, meaning take a hand that's got $1 million in it and take a hand that's got a penny in it. Which one do you think that most people will pick? Oh, they'll pick the $1 million any day of the week. And they don't want the penny because they see the penny out here, but see, The penny of God is eternal. The $1 million of the flesh is paper. You can burn it. It's kindling. So what is he saying here? Than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. What is a season? A season with the $1 million in your hand maybe looks really good, but Moses was looking at the season that Christ would offer. Listen to what it says. Esteeming the reproach of Christ's greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. See, he could have had instant treasures if he didn't want to do the will of God and follow the will of God. Listen to what it says. For he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. Meaning that word recompense is a lot like the final outcome. Meaning the day that the penny goes in your hand and the day that the $1 million goes in your hand, he knew that day would come sooner or later. That word recompense was the day of reckoning, meaning that there was going to be a day that he was going to stand before the Lord, and he didn't want to stand before the Lord with the $1 million in his hand. He wanted to stand before the Lord with the amount that God was going to give him plus the reward. And that's what he's saying here. For he had respect unto the recompense of the reward, meaning the reward of God, because Pharaoh couldn't give it to him. And then it says, as he moves on, you notice that it's sort of giving history here of this man named Moses. In verse 27, by faith, he forsook Egypt. What do you do when you forsake something? You walk away from it. You turn your back on it. That's where I think a lot of people don't want to turn their back. They want the pleasures of sin for a season, just like it just read up there just a minute ago. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. It says, for he endured. Now, back in his day, he did endure. A lot of people like using that word endure because they think they got to endure to keep God's favor and keep God's blessing. Well, Moses endured. But see, Moses wasn't trying to bargain with God. You can't bargain with God. And if you're out there today and you're trying to bargain with God, it ain't going to work. Moses wasn't bargaining with God. He was just basically obeying God. For he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Now, what does that mean? He didn't see God. He saw the wealth of the $1 million that was over here in his hand that Pharaoh could have let him receive. But he was more into what this hand had, even though that he couldn't see what was in this hand right here. I remember in this same area where there was two men that was told to go pick your land. And one man decided that, okay, you go whichever direction you want to go. You choose where you want to go. Well, The man chose the prettiest land in front of him. But it just so happened that that wasn't the blessing. The other man chose the will of God. And in the will of God, there was a blessing. Just because it looks good doesn't mean that it's always blessed of God. See what he's saying here? For he had respect unto the recompense of reward, as seeing him who is invisible. He couldn't see God with his eyes. He knew God in his heart, but he couldn't see God with his eyes. Through faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. So, see, he kept the Passover. He kept God's rules and regulations. He kept God's ways. He kept God's love. He kept God's protection on his life and the country of Israel, far as the people that was held in bondage. And see, as we go on, we'll see where that we read that he was protecting the people of God. So it says, through faith, he kept the Passover. Back in the Bible days, in the Old Testament, the Passover was a major thing that had to be done in order to show favor of God and the love of God and the benefits and the pros of everything that God had, because they could have been destroyed, just like he said in this verse, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. See, this man Pharaoh was trying to kill off the firstborn. They thought that the firstborn males was going to overthrow the Egyptians by them having babies. So he just decides, you know what? I'll kill off all the male babies. I'll just get rid of them. That way you keep down the problem, where their army won't get bigger than the Egyptian army. So it was like that he was sacrificing. Well, that's what he's saying right here. Lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. And then it says in verse 29, by faith, they passed through the Red Sea by dry land. Now that was when Moses stood up to Pharaoh. And you remember the plagues that the Bible talks about, that the plagues was the frogs and the locust and the water turning to blood and the flies, I think it was. And I'm sure I'm missing some, I know, but everything just kept getting worse and worse and worse until finally it got down to Pharaoh's son. I believe it was. I believe I'm right on that. God ended up having to remove his son. Oh, that made him mad. That made him real mad. He told Moses, you take your people and get out of here. His attitude was, get the heck away from me. Take your people and head out. Take your people and go. Take your people and leave. I don't even want to see your face. And so, obviously, they left. And it says, by faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land. Meaning, to remember when the Bible verses start talking about over in Exodus, I believe it is, where they was standing at the Red Sea and the water was covering everything. The people started to complain. You brought us out here to die. We had it better making bricks with Pharaoh's army. Remember, they had to go get their own straw and their own supplies, and they had a quota that they had to make so many bricks and do so much work, and they was beaten and whipped and kicked and brutalized to perform what they needed to perform. And God had mercy, and he used Moses to go and tell the king that, look, you don't have no right to hold them here. And God ended up taking the man's son. But what did Pharaoh do? Pharaoh sent his army, because it says here, which the Egyptians essaying to do were drowned. Let me remember, if I can remember the title of what I said at the very beginning. Being on the winning side. I want to think that Moses knew what it meant to be on the winning side, even though Moses could have taken Pharaoh's money, Pharaoh's fame, Pharaoh's fortune, and lived in the lap of luxury. But that wasn't God's will. God's will was for Moses to lead the people out. Now, did he know that at the early time of his life? Maybe he didn't, but he knew it in time because God got his attention. And even Moses, bless his heart, he's saying, God, I can't speak for you. I stutter. You know, I used to stutter. And sometimes I think I still do stutter. But you know, Moses was there trying his best to get out of the responsibility. And I think Joshua went with him. I believe that was the man's name. But Moses told old Pharaoh, let my people go. Let God's people go. He did when he lost his son. It just proves that he was on the wrong side. Sort of like that king was that was looking inside the fiery furnace on them 3 Hebrew boys, remember? The fire was so hot that it even killed the men that threw the men in the furnace. The fire was heated 7 times hotter than what was designed to heat. Even to the point that even that king went down and said, look, I see there's 3 in the fire walking around. And I see the other one as the 4th man in the fire with them. And he looks to me like he is the Son of God. That man there wasn't on the winning side. You know, the Bible says that he honored God when he called them 3 Hebrew boys out of that fiery furnace. He called them out, told them, come on out here. Even made some broad statements about their faith and their belief in the God. Remember, them 3 boys said, you know, King, we're not going to serve you. You can kill us if you want to, but we're not going to serve you. Yep. So, there's 2 examples today of this message to be on the winning side. Be on the winning side. Moses was on the winning side. Them 3 Hebrew boys was on the winning side. Today, you can be on the winning side. It takes salvation to get on the winning side. Okay? I hope you got something from it. I got it off of me, and now it's on video. Elderly Ministry is how you contact me. If you'd like to go to YouTube, this is the YouTube channel right here. You can go to YouTube, dial me up. There's a phone number there if you'd like to talk. I'd love to talk with you. If you got a question about salvation, I'd certainly love to talk with you. That would really make my day. Okay? I appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank y'all for watching.